3 days before your reality shifts, something strange happens, and most people miss it. They dismiss it as stress or coincidence or their imagination. But it's not random. It's a signal, a quantum warning that you're about to jump timelines, that the reality you've been living in is about to collapse and a new one is about to solidify. And if you know what to look for, if you can recognize the signs when they appear, you can prepare. You can navigate the shift consciously instead of being thrown into it confused and disoriented. Because the shift is coming, whether you're ready or not. But being ready changes everything. I'm going to tell you exactly what happens in those 3 days. The specific signs that appear, the sensations you feel, the disruptions in your normal patterns. And by the end of this, you'll know whether you're in the warning period right now, whether your reality is about to shift, and what to do when it does. But first, you need to understand what a reality shift actually is, because it's not what most people think. A reality shift isn't about circumstances changing slowly over time. It's not gradual improvement or incremental progress. It's a quantum collapse, a moment where the timeline you've been experiencing becomes unstable and you jump to a different timeline. A different version of reality that was always there, running parallel to this one but that you weren't experiencing. And the jump happens fast, not over months, over days, sometimes hours. One moment you're in one reality, the next you're in another, and everything is different. Not slightly different, fundamentally different, different opportunities, different people responding to you differently, different possibilities available, different version of you active. And before it happens, before the jump occurs, reality sends warning signs, disruptions, glitches, sensations that something is off, and these signs appear in a very specific time frame. 72 hours before the shift, 3 days, like a countdown, and the signs get stronger as you get closer to the jump. Day 3, they're subtle, easy to miss. Day 2, they're more obvious, harder to ignore. Day 1, they're unmistakable. Reality is visibly unstable. And then the shift happens, and you wake up in a different timeline. Now here's what most people do. They feel the signs and they panic. They try to stop them. They try to stabilize back into the old reality because the instability feels wrong, feels like something is breaking. And they fight it. They cling to what was. And sometimes they succeed in aborting the shift. They pull themselves back into the old timeline, and they stay stuck there for months or years until the next window opens. But the people who recognize the signs for what they are, who understand that the instability is not a problem but a doorway, those people lean into it. They let the old reality destabilize. They allow the shift, and they end up in timelines they couldn't have accessed any other way. So pay very close attention to what I'm about to tell you, because if you're in the 3-day window right now and you don't know it, you might abort a shift that could change your entire life. But if you recognize it, if you see the signs and understand what's happening, you can navigate it. You can choose which timeline you shift into instead of randomly collapsing into whatever your unconscious frequency is matched to. This is about conscious timeline jumping, and it starts with recognizing the warning period. Here's what happens on day 3, 72 hours before the shift. The first sign is time distortion. Your sense of time becomes unreliable. Hours feel like minutes. Minutes feel like hours. You look at the clock expecting one time and it's completely different than you thought. You lose track of what day it is. You forget what you did yesterday or this morning. Time stops being linear and starts feeling fluid, unstable. This is because you're beginning to decouple from the timeline you're in. Your consciousness is starting to loosen its attachment to this version of reality. And time is the scaffolding of timelines. When time gets weird, you're in the warning period. Second sign on day 3. Repetitive thoughts about a specific person or situation you haven't thought about in a long time. Someone from your past drops into your awareness and won't leave. Or a situation you thought was resolved suddenly feels present again. This is not random. This is quantum entanglement activating. The new timeline you're about to shift into has a different relationship with that person or situation, and your consciousness is beginning to touch that timeline before you fully jump. So the entanglement pulls them into your awareness as preparation. Third sign on day 3. Technology glitches. Your phone acts strange, apps crash, messages don't send or arrive late. Electronics behave unpredictably. This is because your electromagnetic field is becoming unstable as you prepare to shift, and electronics are sensitive to electromagnetic fluctuations. When your field destabilizes before a timeline jump, devices around you respond. If all three of these are happening, you're in day 3 of the warning period, and you have 48 hours before the shift. I'm going to tell you what happens on day 2 and day 1, and what to do when the shift actually occurs. But you need to understand why this happens at all, and that's where the quantum mechanics gets important. Reality doesn't shift randomly. It shifts when your frequency becomes incompatible with the timeline you're in. You've been vibrating at one level, experiencing the reality that matches that vibration. But something changed. Maybe you had a breakthrough. Maybe you released something you'd been holding on to for years. Maybe you made a decision that fundamentally altered who you are. Whatever it was, your frequency elevated, and now you're vibrating at a level that doesn't match this timeline anymore. You've outgrown it, and reality has to reorganize to match your new frequency. But you can't just instantly appear in a new timeline. There's a transition period, a decoupling process, where your consciousness begins to detach from the current reality and prepare to lock into the new one. And that process takes approximately 72 hours, 3 days. Not because the universe is slow, because you are matter. And matter takes time to reorganize itself around new energetic structures. Your consciousness can shift instantly, but your physical body and the physical circumstances around you need time to catch up. And during that time, you're in between. Not fully in the old timeline, not fully in the new one. And that in-between state is what creates the warning signs. Think of it like changing radio stations. The moment you turn the dial, you're no longer locked onto the old frequency, but you're not yet locked onto the new one either. There's a moment of static, of interference, where you're hearing fragments of both stations but neither one clearly. That's the 3-day warning period. You're hearing static, fragments of the old reality, glimpses of the new one, but nothing is stable yet. And your nervous system registers this as something being wrong, because it is trained to interpret instability as danger. But the instability isn't danger, it's transition. The warning signs are your consciousness and your physical reality being out of sync. Your consciousness has already begun moving toward the new timeline. It's touching it, sampling it, preparing to lock in. But your body is still in the old timeline, still experiencing the old circumstances. And the mismatch creates glitches. Time distortion happens because your consciousness is experiencing time in the new timeline while your body is experiencing time in the old one. And the two don't match. Technology glitches happen because your electromagnetic field is fluctuating as it prepares to stabilize at the new frequency. And the fluctuation interferes with electronic devices. The thoughts about specific people or situations are your consciousness accessing information from the new timeline. In the timeline you're shifting into, your relationship with that person or situation is different. Maybe resolved, maybe active again, maybe transformed. And as your consciousness begins to touch that timeline, it pulls that information into your awareness. Not as memory, as present moment knowing. You're not remembering them. You're feeling the version of reality where they matter differently, and your mind interprets that as random thoughts. But they're not random. They're preview of the new timeline. On day 2, 48 hours before the shift, the signs intensify. Time distortion gets worse. You might lose entire chunks of time. Look at the clock, do something, look back and 3 hours passed, but it felt like 20 minutes. Or the opposite. 5 minutes feels like an hour. You start missing appointments or showing up early because your internal clock is completely off. This is you decoupling further, less attached to this timeline's time structure, more aligned with the new one. Second sign on day 2, people respond to you differently. Conversations feel off. People treat you like you said or did something you don't remember saying or doing. Or they act like they don't know something about you that they definitely should know. This is because you're beginning to exist in a slightly different vibrational state than they are. You're mid-shift, and they're still locked in the old timeline. So there's a perceptual mismatch. You're becoming slightly out of phase with the reality they're experiencing. And they feel it even if they can't articulate it. Third sign on day 2, physical sensations. Dizziness, vertigo, feeling like you're not quite in your body, tingling, pressure in your head, exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, or sudden bursts of manic energy. Your body is recalibrating, preparing to anchor into a different timeline, and the recalibration creates physical symptoms, not illness. Transition. If you're experiencing all of these on day 2, you have 24 hours before the shift completes. And then, day 1, 24 hours before you jump. This is where it gets undeniable. Time doesn't just distort, it breaks. You'll have moments where you're not sure if something happened or if you imagined it, where reality feels dreamlike, where you question if you're awake or asleep. People will say things that don't make sense. You'll see things out of the corner of your eye that aren't there when you look directly. Electronics will full-on malfunction, and you'll feel it in your body. A knowing that something massive is about to happen. Not fear, just certainty. Reality is about to shift, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, only navigate it. Here's where most people sabotage the shift. They feel the instability, and they try to fix it. They feel time getting weird, and they try to ground themselves back into normal time. They feel people responding differently, and they try to force the old dynamic. They feel their body recalibrating, and they try to stop the symptoms with medication or distraction or denial. They interpret everything that's happening as something going wrong, and they fight it. They resist the decoupling. They try to stabilize back into the old timeline, and sometimes they succeed. And when they do, they abort the shift. And here's what happens when you abort. The warning signs stop. Time normalizes. People go back to treating you the same way. Your body settles, and you think you fixed the problem. But you didn't fix a problem. You killed an opportunity. Because you weren't breaking. You were breaking through. And you pulled yourself back from the edge before the jump could complete. And the timeline you were about to shift into, the reality that was forming around your new frequency, it collapses back into potential, unmanifested, and you stay in the old timeline, the one you outgrew, the one that no longer matches who you've become. And you wonder why you feel stuck, why nothing is changing, why you can't seem to break through no matter what you do. It's because you keep aborting the shift when the warning period appears. The warning period is not a problem to solve. It's a process to allow. The instability is not something wrong with you. It's something right happening to you. You're not losing your mind. You're not falling apart. You're in transition, between timelines. And transition is supposed to feel unstable, because you're literally not stable. You're mid-jump, 1 foot in the old reality, 1 foot in the new one. And that position is inherently uncomfortable, but it's temporary. If you let it complete, you land in the new timeline and everything stabilizes again. But if you panic and pull back, you stay stuck in the old one, and the opportunity closes, and you have to wait for the next window, which might be months, might be years. So what do you do instead? You recognize the signs for what they are. You see the time distortion, and instead of trying to force yourself back into linear time, you let time be fluid. You accept that for the next 3 days your relationship with time is going to be strange, and you work with it instead of against it. You don't schedule important things during the warning period if you can avoid it. You give yourself space to be in transition. You tell people you're going through something and you might be a little off. You create room for the process instead of trying to maintain normal while abnormal is happening. When people respond to you differently, you don't take it personally. You understand that you're vibrating at a different frequency than they are. You're mid-shift, and they're not. So there's a perceptual gap, and that gap creates weird interactions. Let them be weird. Don't try to force the old connection. Don't try to prove you're still the same person, because you're not. You're becoming a different version. And the new timeline has different relationships. Some people will come with you into the new reality. Some won't. And trying to drag the old dynamics into the new timeline just creates resistance. When your body has symptoms, you support it. You rest if you're exhausted. You move if you have manic energy. You hydrate. You eat clean. You don't suppress the recalibration with substances or distractions. You let your body do what it needs to do to prepare for the new timeline. The dizziness passes. The vertigo settles. The exhaustion lifts. But only if you let the process complete. If you interrupt it, you prolong it, or abort it entirely. The key is this. During the warning period, your job is not to stay normal. Your job is to stay open. Open to the instability. Open to the strangeness. Open to the shift that's trying to happen. You're not holding on to the old reality. You're not forcing the new one. You're in the space between, and you're letting that space do its work. You're in the quantum gap, where one timeline is dissolving and another is forming. And the gap is uncomfortable, but it's also sacred. It's where transformation actually happens. Not before, not after, during. And if you can be present in the gap, if you can let yourself be in transition without trying to rush back to stability, you'll complete the shift. And you'll land in a timeline you couldn't have accessed any other way. So you've recognized the signs. You're in the warning period. You know a shift is coming. Now what? How do you make sure you shift into the timeline you actually want instead of randomly collapsing into whatever timeline your unconscious patterns are matched to? Because here's the thing. The shift is going to happen either way, but where you land is determined by your frequency during the transition. And most people don't manage their frequency during the warning period. They let fear run. They let doubt spiral. They let the instability trigger every survival pattern they have. And those patterns have a frequency. And that frequency determines the timeline they collapse into, so they shift. But they shift into a timeline that matches fear and doubt and survival. Not the timeline they actually wanted. Conscious timeline navigation during the warning period requires three things: clarity, calm, and commitment. Clarity about which timeline you're choosing. Calm in your nervous system despite the instability around you. And commitment to holding the frequency of the desired timeline even when physical reality hasn't caught up yet. Let me break down how to do each one. Clarity first. You need to know which timeline you're selecting. Not vaguely, specifically. Because there are infinite timelines you could shift into. And during the warning period, you're in a heightened state of quantum potential. More timelines are accessible than normal. So you have to be clear about which one you're choosing. And clarity comes from asking the right question. Not, what do I want to happen? But, who am I in the timeline where this is already real? Get specific. How does that version of you feel? What do they know? What do they not worry about anymore? What's normal for them that's extraordinary for current you? Write it down. Get clear. This is your target frequency. Then calm. This is the hardest part. Because everything during the warning period is designed to trigger fear. Time breaks. People act strange. Your body feels off. Reality feels unstable. And your nervous system interprets instability as danger. It wants to panic. It wants to fight or flee or freeze. And if you let the panic take over, you'll broadcast panic frequency. And you'll shift into a timeline that matches panic. So you have to regulate, consciously, deliberately. You breathe. You ground. You remind yourself that the instability is not danger. It's transition. You're not falling apart. You're reorganizing at a higher level. And you keep your nervous system as calm as possible while the shift completes. Then commitment. This is where most people break. They have clarity. They have calm. But on day 2 or day 1, when nothing has physically changed yet, when they're still in the old circumstances, still seeing the old bank account, still in the old relationship dynamic, they lose faith. They think, this isn't working. And they collapse back into the old frequency, the frequency of lack or stuck or limitation. And that frequency determines where they land. So commitment means holding the target frequency regardless of what physical reality currently shows. Because physical reality during the warning period is still reflecting the old timeline. It hasn't caught up to your new frequency yet. But it will. If you hold steady. If you're in the warning period right now, If you're experiencing these signs and you're ready to navigate the shift consciously instead of unconsciously, write "I am conscious" in the comments. Not as magic word, as acknowledgement. You see what's happening. You're not going to abort it. You're not going to panic through it. You're going to navigate it. And you're going to land in a timeline that matches the highest version of who you're becoming. The shift completes fast. One moment you're in transition. The next, you're through. And everything is different. Not slightly. Fundamentally. The people around you respond differently. Opportunities appear that weren't there before. Your body feels different. Your energy is different. And you know. Without question, you jumped. You're in a new timeline. And the old one is behind you, not accessible anymore. Collapsed into the past. And the new one is solid, real, yours. But only if you navigate the warning period correctly. Only if you recognize the signs, allow the process and hold the frequency. That's what the next 2 blocks are about. What happens immediately after the shift, and how to know you successfully jumped timelines instead of aborting back into the old one. The shift completes suddenly. There's no gradual transition from almost there to done. One moment you're in the instability of the warning period, and the next moment everything clicks into place. And you know. Not because someone tells you. Not because you see obvious evidence, you just know the shift happened, you're through, you're in a different timeline now. And the knowing is visceral, physical, like your entire body just locked into a new frequency and everything stabilized around it. The first thing you notice is the silence. Not external silence. Internal silence. The anxiety that was running during the warning period just stops. The questioning, the uncertainty, the "is this really happening" mental loop. It's gone. Replaced by a calm that feels almost eerie after 3 days of instability. Your nervous system knows the transition is complete. It's no longer preparing for something, it's arrived. And there's a settling that happens, a grounding. You're here, fully, in the new timeline. And your body reflects that. Time normalizes immediately. Not gradually, immediately. You look at the clock and time makes sense again. Hours feel like hours. You know what day it is. You remember what you did this morning. The fluidity and distortion of the warning period vanishes the moment the shift completes. Because you're no longer decoupling from one timeline and preparing for another. You're locked into the new one. And that timeline has its own time structure. And you're in sync with it now. But here's what's strange. The external circumstances don't change instantly. You complete the shift and you look around and the bank account is still the same. The relationship still looks the same. The job is still the same. And this is where people panic. They think, I shifted but nothing changed, it didn't work. But that's not how this works. The shift happened at the quantum level, at the level of frequency and probability. The physical manifestation lags behind, sometimes by days, sometimes by weeks. But the shift is done. You're in the new timeline. And physical reality is reorganizing to match. You just can't see it yet. What you can see, if you're paying attention, are the micro changes. The way people respond to you is different. Not dramatically, subtly. Someone who was distant is suddenly warm. Someone who was interested suddenly pulls back. A conversation you've had 100 times goes in a completely different direction. Opportunities appear that weren't there 3 days ago. Synchronicities increase. Things line up in ways that feel almost too perfect. These are signs that you're in a different timeline, that the probability structure around you has shifted. And these micro changes are the leading edge of the macro changes that are coming. You'll also notice things you don't remember. Small things. A conversation someone references that you have no memory of. An event they mention that doesn't match your recollection. A detail about your past that feels slightly off. This is because you shifted timelines, and the new timeline has a slightly different past than the old one. Not radically different, but different enough to notice if you're paying attention. You're experiencing the Mandela effect in real time. Not because your memory is failing, because you jumped to a timeline with a different history, and your consciousness remembers the old timeline while physical reality reflects the new one. The other thing that happens immediately after the shift is clarity. Decisions that were hard before the shift become obvious. Situations that felt confusing suddenly make sense. You see clearly what needs to happen next. Not because you figured it out, because in this timeline you're a version of yourself that already knows. The confusion was part of the old timeline, the old frequency, and you're not in that frequency anymore. You're in the new one. And the new one has different information available, different intuitive downloads, different knowing. But here's the critical part. The first 72 hours after the shift are stabilization period. Just like there were 3 days before to decouple from the old timeline, there are 3 days after to fully anchor into the new one. And during those 3 days you can still slip back. If you panic because the physical circumstances haven't changed yet. If you start doubting whether the shift actually happened. If you collapse back into the old frequency, you can undo the shift. Pull yourself back into the old timeline before the new one fully solidifies. So the practice in the first 3 days after is the same as during the warning period. Hold the frequency. Don't check for physical evidence. Don't measure whether it's working. Just be the version of you that exists in this timeline. Make decisions as that version. Think as that version. Operate as that version. And let physical reality catch up. It will. Always. If you don't interfere, the shift is done. The timeline is selected. The manifestation is in motion. You just have to let it complete without collapsing back into doubt. Here's how you know for certain that you successfully jumped timelines and didn't just experience a weird 3 days that didn't lead anywhere. The physical manifestations start appearing. Not all at once. In sequence like dominoes falling. One thing shifts, then another, then another. And each shift confirms that you're in a different probability structure than you were before the warning period started. It might be money, an unexpected payment, a refund, an opportunity that brings income you weren't expecting. It might be relationship. Someone reaches out. A conversation happens that changes the dynamic. A resolution appears for something that felt stuck. It might be opportunity. A door opens. An invitation arrives. Something becomes available that wasn't available in the old timeline. Whatever it is, it's something that could not have happened in the timeline you were in before. It's evidence that the probability structure changed, that you're experiencing a different set of possibilities now. And once the first domino falls, the rest follow faster. Because you're no longer doubting, you have confirmation. And the confirmation strengthens your frequency, makes it easier to hold, and the stronger frequency accelerates the manifestation. It's exponential. The first shift takes the longest, the second comes faster, the third faster still, until you're living in a reality that looks completely different than the one you were in 2 weeks ago.